In 1888, the fog rolled thick and gray through Whitechapel's narrow alleys, where the desperate came to stay. 5 women walked those cobblestones, seeking shelter from the cold. Just pennies for a bed space at the White Castle, we're told. Mary Ann and Annie, their stories cut too short. Elizabeth and Catherine, no justice in the court. And Mary Jane Kelly, the last one we know. 5 souls the world remembers, but their dignity we owe. They weren't just headlines, they were mothers, they were daughters, trying to survive the night in London's darkest waters. The Ripper took their bodies, but he couldn't take their names. We remember them as people, not just victims of his games. Dear boss, began the letter. Was the writer truthful or a fake? The media circus gathered as 5 families' hearts would break. He wasn't the first killer, though the papers made him famous. 4 pens bought a bed space for the poor with nowhere else to go. Walking after midnight, selling nothing but themselves. They weren't just headlines, they were mothers, they were daughters, trying to survive the night in London's darkest waters. The Ripper took their bodies, but he couldn't take their names. We remember them as people, not just victims of his games. The world was watching London, but who was watching them? 5 women in the shadows, society condemned them. We'll never know the truth of who walked those streets at night, but we know the names of those who lost their fight. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, hear their call, Elizabeth Stride. Catherine Eddowes, we remember all. Mary Jane Kelly, the 5th and final name. They deserve so much more, and their 15 minutes of fame. When you hear the story of Jack and his dark game, remember first the women, remember every name. Because having silence is betrayal, we won't let them fade. 5 lives that mattered then, 5 voices unafraid. In the shadows of Whitechapel, we remember them today.
Live on the air, Trial Junkies United presents Justice After Dark with your host, The.
Thank you, love. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to see you guys. Southern Gal True Crime, Dandelioness, Fala, and Irish Amy, OnlyFan, Therapist, sailor's wisdom. Let's see. I know we had some John, Bubba, and of course my dearest Ken.
Southern
If
Gal,
I've
did you mention her?
I think I did. I hope so.
I hope so too.
If I missed anyone, let me know. We love you all. No favorites, but do give my mods a little love because they're good. So, you guys, welcome to Trial Junkies United, Justice After Dark. Greetings to all the trial junkies, the truth seekers, and the justice warriors. I'm Z, your storyteller in the wilderness of injustice. With my ride or die doc riding shotgun as we navigate the darkness where the predators hunt and the system fails. We're ready to shine a light on the forgotten story society wants us to leave buried. But before we get started, I actually want to take just a personal moment here because today I need to wish Doc happy anniversary, my love, to the best ride or die a woman could ever ask for.
Aw, that is so sweet.
Well, I bring the ideas, the chaos,
Happy
and
anniversary back.
the big visions, but somehow you always know how to make them work out. You're my
Yeah.
part
Oh,
you're my
sort of.
my partner in crime, my love, not only on the show but in life. You're the most amazing person I know, and I love you dearly. And
Thank
it
you.
feels like yesterday that we said I do.
40 years today.
Yep,
I
and you
love
had to go
you.
spill the number.
Yeah, well, they they're
I'll
they're
let it
they're in, and we're spending the anniversary with y'all.
because we love y'all. And we were babies when we got married. What can I say?
Yep.
And I can't wait to see what the next century brings us. So let's get started tonight. We're going to step back in time. We're going to go back to gaslit streets of Victorian London, 1888. We're walking into the shadows of Whitechapel, where the fog hung thick as death itself, where poverty crushed souls like insects, and where a killer stalked the night, leaving a legacy of terror that still haunts us 137 years later. But we're also stepping into 2024, into a forensic war zone where researchers applied cutting edge DNA techniques to a 136-year-old shawl and declared, "We've confirmed it. Aaron Kosminski is Jack the Ripper." Meanwhile, other scientists are screaming, that Shaw was never at the crime scene. The chain of custody is broken, and your methodology is fundamentally flawed. So who's right? Tonight, we're going to step in the middle of the biggest forensic fight in true crime history. Buckle up, guys. This is going to be a good one. And let's get started. Hey, Capri Law joined us. I'm glad you're here, sweetheart. So, Whitechapel, 1888. Remember, Queen Victoria at the time had been ruling for 50 years. But before we understand the monster, we're going to understand the hunting grounds, okay? Queen Victoria on the throne, like I said, 50 years. The West End is gleaming. There's new music halls, fancy restaurants, and hotels popping up on every corner. The wealthy are living their best Victorian lives. But crossed over to the East End, and you've entered hell on earth. And that would be Whitechapel. It wasn't always a slum. Until the end of the 16th century, it was a prosperous district. By the mid 1800s, something had shifted. The less desirable industries moved in. You had tanneries, breweries, foundries, and they brought workers, lots of workers, poor workers, desperate workers. And by 1888, about 900,000 people were crammed into the East End, and 250,000 of them were packed into Whitechapel itself. Now, here's the kicker, you guys. 15,000 of those people were classified as homeless. Sound familiar? Think about that for a second. 15,000 people with nowhere to go, sleeping in doorways, huddled in alleyways. The living conditions, atrocious. Doesn't even begin to cover it. Multiple families, sometimes up to 9 people crammed into single rooms. Over 200 common lodging houses housed 8,000 plus homeless and destitute people every single night. There was no proper ventilation, no sanitation, sewage ran openly through the streets. The diseases like cholera and tuberculosis spread like wildfire. 1 in 4 children didn't reach their 5th birthday. Let that sink in, 1 in 4. The streets were a maze, dense, hazardous labyrinth of dead ends, courtyards, alleys, passageways, and tunnels. Lighting was minimal, often just a flicker of gas lamps behind filthy glass on moonless nights, between rows of tall buildings on narrow streets. It was pitch black at street level. Crime was everywhere. Petty theft was commonplace, violent crimes, rampant, alcohol related violence, gang crime, protection rackets, you name it, they had it. The police were so overwhelmed and so poorly organized that they were afraid to enter parts of Whitechapel. And prostitution, that was survival for many women. It's estimated that around 1,200 prostitutes worked in Whitechapel in 1888. These women weren't glamorous, they were desperate, selling themselves for as little as 3 pence or a stale loaf of bread. Many had turned to alcoholism. Most looked decades older than their actual age, bloated, diseased. Some had missing teeth. Beds. Let me tell you about rope beds. Let me give you some context to how desperate things were. Rope beds were a form of a cheap accommodation. Hey, Drunky the Bear's here. Um, and they were known as the two-penny hangover or a penny hang. For a few pennies, the destitute could lean over a rope in a crowded, unsanitary, typical lodging house rather than sleep on the streets.
Yeah, just keep in mind that people that picture right there was not people that were deceased.
No, they were sleeping.
They were sleeping.
That was how they went to sleep.
Yeah.
Another one, the coffin bed. The cost was typically 2 pence for a night, cheaper than the four-penny coffin bed, a narrow wooden box to lie in. Lodgers would sit on a bench or simply stood slumping forward over a thick, taut rope stretched across the room at chest height. This prevented them from falling onto the floor, but offered little comfort or actual sleep. These dose houses were notoriously grim and overcrowded, poorly ventilated, unhygienic, often infested with lice and fleas. Privacy was non existent and disease was rampant. And at a set time in the morning, around 5 a.m., 6 a.m., the rope would be unceremoniously untied or dropped, sending everyone tumbling to the floor as the wake up call. And after that, they were forced into the street. But despite these brutal conditions, it was considered a marginally better option than sleeping on the freezing, wet streets, which was illegal under the Vagrancy Act of 1824 and could lead to arrests. And this is the world that Jack the Ripper chose as his killing ground. Hey, Farquaad. So I'm going to paint another picture for you. It's October. It's 1888. You're in a lodging house, a flower in Dean Street. one of London's most notorious streets. An old woman rushes up to you and demands, "Are you Jack the Ripper?" Then she laughs nervously. "I know you ain't him. You wouldn't rip me off, would you?" And someone in the corner starts singing, "Has anyone seen him? Can you tell us where he is? If you meet him, you must take away his knife, then give him to the woman. They'll spoil his pretty phiz, and I wouldn't give him a tuppence for his life." This is real. This was from the newspaper account from October 5th of 1888. That's what terror looked like. People singing songs to keep their spirits up, making dark jokes because the alternative is to give into absolute dread. And this is what gets me. This wasn't just happening in the remote village. At the time, London was the capital of the world in 1888. It was the largest city that had ever existed. 6 million people, the heart of the British Empire. And yet, in the heart of the imperial capital, women were being hunted on the street. The Jack the Ripper, the newspapers called him a being in human shape, stealthily moving around about the great city, burning with a thirst for human blood. They used terms such as vampire, ghoul, half beast, half man. But you know what he really was? A man. Just a man who knew how to use fear as a weapon. And the media, they were about to turn him into a legend. Between August 31st and November 9th of 1888, 5 women were murdered in Whitechapel in a manner so brutal, so calculated, that it sent shockwaves through Victorian society. All had their throats cut so deeply they were nearly decapitated. Most were mutilated in ways that suggested the killer knew human anatomy. But let's talk about the women. Who were they? They weren't just victims, but as people. First, we had Mary Ann Nichols, and they called her Polly. August 31st, 1888, she was 43. She was born just off Fleet Street in a working class family. Her father was a locksmith, and her mother was a laundress. She married a printer's assistant named William Nichols, and they had 5 children together. She was a mother, but she started drinking, and it destroyed her marriage. There were accusations of infidelity on both sides, and by the 1880s, she was drifting between workhouses and typical lodging houses, trying to piece together enough money for a bed each night. She tried to get back on her feet and found a placement as a domestic servant with a religious family. But she couldn't stay away from the alcohol. So she absconded, took their clothes, and likely pawned them for booze. Her last words to her friend Ellen Holland at 2:30 a.m. on August 31st, I'll soon get my DOS money. See what a jolly bonnet I've got now." She was proud of that bonnet. It was probably one of the few nice things she owned. She never made it back. Her body was found in Bucks Row at 3:40 a.m. Her throat had been cut, her abdomen mutilated. She was the very first victim. Now we have Annie Chapman, and this is September 8th of 1888. Hey, Anthony, glad you made it. She's 47. Her father was a soldier in the Life Guards. She married a coachman named John Chapman. They had 3 children, though her daughter died at 12, and she had a son that was born disabled, and they actually had to put him in an institution. So, like Polly, Annie turned to alcoholism. And eventually, her husband got tuberculosis and he died. And in 1886, she was living hand to mouth in Whitechapel. She made money, however, she could. She sold flowers, doing crochet work, and yes, occasionally prostitution, because there wasn't a lot of work for women back then. September 7th, she told a friend, "I must go and get some money, otherwise I shall have no lodgings." She got money probably begging, maybe sex work, but spent it on drink instead of a bed. The last words before getting kicked out at 2 a.m. was, "I shall soon be back. Don't let the bed." She was found at 6 a.m. in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street. Her throat was cut. Her uterus and part of her bladder were removed. So the killer was getting bolder. It was more surgical now. Then on September 30th of 1888, at 44 years old, was Elizabeth Gustendaughter. And I probably butchered her name and I apologize. Elizabeth had lived in Sweden. She'd come to London in 1866 seeking a better life, fleeing poverty and limited opportunities in her home country. She married John Stride, a carpenter, and they ran a coffee shop together for a while. But he died in 1884 of tuberculosis, and she fell into poverty and occasionally prostitution. She did have a longtime companion, Michael Kidney, but their relationship was rough. She'd leave him, she'd go back to him, and leave him again. On the night of September 29th, she was observed with the man at approximately 11:45 p.m. By 1 a.m., and actually she had been observed with by a couple of people had seen her. And one had been a police officer, but he didn't see anything suspicious. She was talking to a gentleman. So Lewis Demshorts was driving his cart into Dutfield Yard when his pony shied away from something in the dark. It was Elizabeth. Her throat cut, blood still streaming. In her hand was throat lozenges wrapped in tissue paper. But the critical thing, her body hadn't been mutilated, just her throat. So it seemed like maybe the killer had been interrupted. Now, Catherine Eddowes, I think that's how you say it, maybe not, and I apologize, Catherine, September 30th, 1888, less than an hour after Stride. She was 46, born Catherine Conway in Wolverhampton. She has a daughter from a previous relationship before meeting John Kelly, a market porter. They lived together as common law husband and wife for 7 years. She was actually described by those who knew her as very intelligent and scholarly. She actually could read and write, which was unusual for women of her class back then. She was remembered as friendly and cheerful despite her circumstances. She also drank, and on the night of September 29th, she was arrested for being drunk and disorderly. The police held her in a cell until 1 a.m. Then they released her. By 1:44 a.m., she was dead in Market Square. And this murder was savage. Her throat cut ear to ear, her abdomen ripped open, her intestines were pulled out, placed over her shoulder, her uterus removed, kidney removed, part of her earlobe cut off, and he had cut her face up. All of this was done in 14 minutes between police patrols. So the killer had been interrupted with Stride, so he found another victim and unleashed his full vengeance, his rage. This was the night that became known as the double event, 2 murders in one night, less than a mile apart. And then we have our 5th victim, Mary Jane Kelly, November 9th, 1888, age 25. She's the youngest victim. She was Irish, likely from Limerick, reportedly very pretty, with blonde hair, blue eyes. And she told people she'd been married young to a collier named Davies, who died in a mining accident. That she'd worked as a prostitute in a high-class West End brothel. That a gentleman had taken her to Paris, and we don't know whether any of that was true. The stories she told changed depending on who she told. What we do know is she lived with a fish porter named Joseph Barnett in a tiny room 10 feet by 12 feet at 13 Miller's Court. He lost his job and she returned to soliciting. They fought and he moved out. November 8th, he comes back to visit, but he has no money to give her. She's 6 weeks behind on rent, and the landlord is demanding payment. And that night, she goes out in torrential rain. She's seen singing an Irish song around 4 a.m. Scenes of my childhood arise before my gaze, bringing recollections by bygone happy days. No one's left to cheer me now within that good old home. Around 4 a.m., neighbors hear screams, which is the word that means they have killed you, starts with an M, but they don't respond because, as one neighbor told police, I do not take much notice of the cries as I frequently hear such cries. Now, think about that, you guys.
Frequently.
Frequently.
Hmm.
Someone is screaming out that they're being killed frequently. That nobody's paying attention. And so at 10:45 a.m., the landlord sends his assistant to collect rent. The door is locked, so he looks through the broken window. What he saw, he said, I can never forget if I live to be 100. Mary Jane Kelly's body was so mutilated that she could only be identified by her eyes and her hair. Her face had been hacked at, her body had been systematically dismembered, organs removed, placed around the room, the bed was soaked with blood. And here's the historic significance. This was the first time police actually photographed a crime scene. They brought in a photographer to document the horror in that tiny room, and the media ran with it. The newspapers published lurid descriptions. Artists created sensationalized illustrations. The story spread across the world, and the name Jack the Ripper became synonymous with terror. Now, the media helped create the legend we know today. They turned a series of brutal murders into the most famous unsolved case in history. And they made Jack the Ripper pretty much immortal. After Mary Jane Kelly, the murder stopped. The Ripper vanished. Inspector Frederick Aberdline was the lead detective. Now, in some TV shows or movies they make him like he's a bumbling, idiot. But he was actually a good cop. But he was working an impossible case, you guys. Because here's what he's up against. Number one, they did not have modern forensics. There was no fingerprinting. That didn't exist until 1901. No blood testing, no DNA, no crime labs. Crime scene contamination. When Annie Chapman's body was discovered, crowds had gathered. Neighbors had charged a penny to look into the yard where she died. The crime scenes were trampled before the police arrived. So there was too much information. They were drowning in false leads. Every crank in London sent letters claiming to be the killer. Every neighbor accused someone. The filing system collapsed under the weight. And then there was the jurisdictional nightmare. Elizabeth Stride was killed in Whitechapel, Metropolitan Police. Catherine Eddowes was killed in Mite Square, which I'm probably saying it wrong. Sorry if I am. The City of London, police, totally different force. They couldn't even share information efficiently. Media interference, the press was creating hysteria and publishing witness accounts and running sensational headlines and possibly even creating evidence. Let's talk about that. The Dear Boss letters. September 27th of 1888, the Central News Agency received a letter. It was written in red ink. Dear Boss, I keep hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I'm down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them till I do get buckled. Grand work on the last job was, I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and I want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. My knife is very sharp. I want to begin work immediately. And if I get a chance, good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. And that signature, Jack the Ripper, that's where the name came from. He named himself. Now, before this letter, he was just the Whitechapel murderer. Most experts think this was a hoax written by a journalist to sell papers. Now, you might wonder, how can that be? Well, number one, there was perfect spelling. Insufficient punctuation suggests someone educated, pretending to be uneducated. It was sent to a news agency, not the police, for maximum publicity. It was postmarked from Fleet Street, where all the newspapers were located. But then came the From Hell letter on October 16th, addressed to George Lusk, chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. It came with half a kidney. Now, from hell, Mr. Lusk, sir, I send you half the kidney I took from one woman. I preserved it for you. And let's just say the other part, he decided to have dinner. Yeah. He said it was very nice. A pathologist examined it. Human kidney. Could it have been Catherine Eddowes' missing kidney? Maybe. Could it have been from any hospital autopsy? Yeah, maybe. We're never going to know. Now, some of the suspects that, there were quite a few that were mentioned. Of course, one was the Queen's nephew, who was actually the ex Prince Andrew of their time. But despite investigating 11 murders between 1888 and 1891, police never charged anyone with the Ripper crimes. Years later, in 1894, Sir Melville Mackinac, an assistant chief constable, wrote a confidential memorandum. He named 3 subjects: Montague John Druitt, a 31-year-old barrister and teacher, history of mental illness. Ooh, what happened there?
Yeah, you pushed the wrong button. There we go.
Oops. Doc has to catch that. So, 31-year-old barrister and teacher, history of mental illness, and he was found dead in the Tyne River in December of 1888, shortly after the final murder. But there was zero hard evidence that ever connected him to the crimes. Inspector Aberline dismissed him as a serious suspect. Well, then he mentioned Michael Ostrog. He was a Russian-born con man who claimed to have been a surgeon in the Russian Navy. Mackinac described him as a homicidal maniac. But prison records showed he was jailed in France for petty offenses during the time of the Ripper murders. So he's out. Then you have Aaron Kosminski. Aaron is a Polish Jewish immigrant who worked as a barber in Whitechapel. And back then, a barber would sometimes be called a surgeon barber. The one photo is when he first immigrated over when he was very young. And then as he got older, they did a drawing. Now, he suffered from severe mental illness. And this is the one who's going to be really essential to the story we're telling. Because Mackinac wrote that Kosminski had strong homicidal tendencies and a great hatred of women, especially of the prostitute class. Now, Sir Robert Anderson was the head of the CID, was convinced Kosminski was the Ripper. He claimed a witness positively identified the suspect, but because the witness, who was also a Polish Jew, he refused to testify against one of their own. But here's the problem. Kosminski wasn't institutionalized until 1891. That's 3 years after the murder stopped. The asylum doctors described him as harmless. His insanity took the form of auditory hallucinations, paranoid fear of being fed by others, and refusal to bathe. The only documented violence was brandishing a chair at an attendant once and allegedly threatening his sister with a knife once, and that's it. That's the extent of his documented violent behavior. That's not exactly the profile of a calculating serial killer who is taking out women's organs with surgical precision. For over a century, this case was cold. And so, how do we get here today? Well, meet Russell Edwards, 2007. He was a British author and a Jack the Ripper enthusiast, and he purchased a silk shawl at auction. And according to the family legend, this shawl was taken from the murder scene of Catherine Eddowes by acting Sergeant Amos Simpson and passed down through his family for over a century. Now, the shawl shows visible stains, blood, and biological material. Edwards was inspired after watching the 2001 film From Hell. He became obsessed with solving the case. When he acquired the shawl, he saw his opportunity. And so in 2014, he commissioned Dr. Lou Helen, I don't know. This dude right here, this scientist, he's a biochemist specializing in historic DNA. Sorry, dude. To test the shawl. I only use scientific terms here. You all know that.
Yes, quite thorough. Yes.
What followed made headlines because on March 2024, the headlines exploded. Jack the Ripper finally identified using advanced DNA technology. 136-year mystery solved. New tests confirm Aaron Kosminski. Science defeats history's most notorious serial killer. Dr. Lou here, I'm shortening his name, his team claimed they used advanced mitochondrial and Y chromosome DNA analysis along with whole genome sequencing to link Aaron Kosminski to the Whitechapel murders. Definitely. Okay, we all know how important DNA is. We know what DNA can solve, right? Awesome. But here we go. They extracted the mitochondrial DNA from the shaw's blood and matched it to a living descendant of Catherine Eddowes, and that is Karen Miller here, her great 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 granddaughter. They also found what they believed to be semen stains that matched DNA from a descendant of Aaron Kosminski's sister. Dr. Liu told the press, "We have used the most advanced DNA techniques available today. The probability that someone else from the same maternal lineage could have left this DNA is astronomically low." Russell Edwards went further. He said, "This isn't speculation anymore. This is proof. Aaron Kosminski was Jack the Ripper, and we can finally close this chapter of history." And that sounds convincing, right? Within 48 hours, though, what happened? The scientific community erupted.
As it probably should have.
Yeah. First, Dr. Chris Phillips, a forensic genetic expert from Spain, published a scathing response. He said, "This isn't peer reviewed." He said, "This is storytelling dressed up in lab coats.
Mhm.
The fundamental problems from 2014 haven't been addressed. They've just been buried under more complicated terminology." Dr. Turi King, who worked on identifying King Richard III's remains, when he identified King Richard III, had a clear chain of custody. He had multiple independent laboratories confirming the results and publications in peer-reviewed journals with full data transparency. He said none of it exists here. Dr. Sue Black from Lancaster University, you cannot bypass provenance with fancy DNA techniques. If you don't know with certainty that this shawl was at the crime scene, all the DNA testing in the world proves nothing except that DNA exists on the fabric. And here's where it's going to get messy. Several scientists requested access to the raw data, the actual DNA sequences, the statistical calculations, and the methodology details. They were refused. Edwards and Liu claimed that proprietary concerns and data protection laws prevented them from sharing. Dude, it's DNA. You didn't come up with anything new. You know. Sorry, Lou. Didn't do it. Next, we have Dr. Mark Bennick, a German forensic biologist. And he responded, and I love this quote, you guys. He said, "That's not how science works. If you make an extraordinary claim solving the most famous cold case in history, you don't get to keep your homework a secret. You show your work, or it's not science. It's a press release." You go, Mark. I like you. This dude's kind of fun. Um, so let's think about this, about the Shaw. Is this problematic? Well, the official record, and I'm talking the official police inventory of Catherine Eddowes' possessions. Okay? They have those records. It says one piece of old white apron with repair, one portion of a pawn ticket, one piece of string, 3 buttons, 1 thimble, 1 red mitten, 1 clay pipe, 5 pieces of soap. Those were her belongings. I don't see a shawl. No mention of any large silk fabric. Nothing. Now, the crime scene reports, Dr. Frederick Gordon Brown's examination report is exhaustive, describing the body's position, the wounds, the blood patterns, the conditions of her clothing. Nowhere did he mention a shawl. The family legend, the story of Amos Simpson taking the shawl, that doesn't appear in any written record until 1988. Okay, that's 100 years after the murder.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, after 100 years, someone remembers I took something from a crime scene? That sounds plausible, doesn't it, Doc?
Well, I, as much as anything else does.
And here's the real kicker, Doc. Simpson wasn't even the officer who discovered the body. He was later assigned to the crime scene. So how would he have access to obtain evidence? See, something's fishy there. The fabric analysis, the fabric is likely from the 1890s or early 1900s. After the Ripper murders, the pattern is exotic with floral designs, and this was high-end fabric. Catherine Eddowes had pawned her boot, but she supposedly owned an 8-foot silk shawl worth several months' wages. And she kept that and got rid of her boots. That makes sense. I mean, really. And forensic blood pattern analysis say the blood distribution doesn't match what you would expect at a murder scene. The blood is in smears and blotches that suggest the fabric was laid on or dabbed against something bloody, not worn by someone during a violent attack. One analysis, this looks like someone wiped up blood with fabric, not like someone wearing fabric was deleted. Okay? And what they tested, mitochondrial DNA from the bloodstains and Y chromosome DNA from the semen stains, and the whole genome sequencing. Now, the blood results, they did match the mtDNA from the blood to Catherine Eddowes' descendant. The problem? That sequence is haplogroup T2. How standard is T2 in Europe? approximately 10% of Western European populations. That's roughly 50 million people in Europe today who share that exact maternal lineage. The semen results, they identified Y chromosomes DNA matching that of a Kosminski descendant of the haplogroup T1A1A1. How common? Approximately 3.5% of the European Jewish population. Given that thousands of Jewish immigrants lived in Whitechapel, this narrows the pool to hundreds of thousands of men in that neighborhood alone. The whole genome sequencing claims in 2024, they report that they used whole genome sequencing, but they haven't published the actual sequences, disclosed which genetic markers they used, explained their statistical methodology, and had independent laboratories verify their results. Dr. Phillips said they're claiming precision they can't demonstrate. Whole genome sequencings from degraded 136-year-old DNA on fabric with unknown storage conditions. Show me another laboratory that can replicate these results. Just one. They can't because they won't share the data. The contamination issues. The shawl has been in the Simpson family for 130 years, handled by dozens of people. Displayed, photographed. Karen Miller, the Eddowes descendant, she handled the Shaw during the filming of a documentary in 2011. So is it possible her DNA ended up on the fabric? Yeah. The Kosminski descendant, whose DNA they matched, also handled the Shaw during the research. So without a clean chain of custody, how do you rule out contamination from the very people you're comparing the DNA against?
You don't.
Can't. Yeah, you can't. Edwards and Dr. Ludude claimed the odds of the DNA matching both Eddowes and Kosminski by chance are 1 in 294,000. Okay. Dr. Mark Perlin, a computational biologist, said that number is meaningless without the context. 1 in 294,000? What? People in Whitechapel? People in London? People in Europe? And critically, how did they calculate that number? What assumptions did they make?
Mhm.
Anthony Gordon, welcome, and you're right. I think they were trained by Dallas PD, or maybe Dallas got trained by them.
Mm.
What assumptions did they make? What database did they use for comparison? In forensic DNA analysis, we use validated databases and peer-reviewed statistical methods. We show our work. We allow other experts to check our math. None of that has happened here. Dr. Bruce Butto, a former FBI forensic scientist, said, "This is not how you build a murder case. This is how you write a screenplay." Okay, and let's just say, okay, let's pretend that the Shaw was at the crime scene and the DNA is from 1888. And it does match Kosminski's lineage. What does that actually prove? Innocent contact? Aaron Kosminski was a barber in Whitechapel. Catherine Eddowes was a prostitute in Whitechapel. Is it possible they had previous consensual contact? Absolutely. The DNA could represent a completely innocent encounter weeks or months before the murder. Post-mortem contamination. What if someone at the crime scene touched the Shaw after touching the body? What if Simpson really did take the Shaw from the scene, but it belonged to someone else entirely and got contaminated with her blood at this chaotic crime scene? What if the Shaw has nothing to do with the Ripper murders at all? What if 130 years of a family legend created a story that never happened? We see this in cold cases all the time. Family oral histories that become true through repetition, even when documentary evidence contradicts them. I mean, if you ask the Native community how many times someone has told them, "I have a great 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 grandmother who was a Cherokee princess," they will laugh in your face. Why they always choose a Cherokee princess, I don't know, but that's the one they go with. So that's how family legends get started. and it doesn't always mean anything. I still like that one scientist's thought that if you don't show your homework, it's not real. Just that tickles me.
But the
So when
evidence was conclusive. We need we need to bring this story to a close. That's what
yeah,
I'm unfortunately that is a lot of people's idea of this whole
well,
Jack the Ripper
I
thing.
think
They want an
I think
answer.
yeah, well, I think it's because that one guy wanted to solve it. The guy that bought the shawl, he just wanted to be the one to solve it,
Yep.
and so he figured out a way. And Irish Lunaferry, you're right. He could have just been a client. We have no way of knowing. I mean, that's just it's ridiculous. Like they said, he could have cut, if it's true that that is his DNA, but like when you break down the DNA and everything, there's no definite that it actually was his. Therapist, you'd make a great princess. Okay. We will let you be a princess today, but you're not a Cherokee princess.
Bottom line here, they have from 100 years ago, let's say 500 years ago, they somebody eyewitnesses a murder. Oh, oops, sorry, deletion. Um, you know, they have irrefutable evidence of what happened, and they still have questions today on what happens. Well, they
Yeah.
have no such thing with the Jack the Ripper case.
Yeah. And one thing that everybody doesn't consider is none of these women had been SA'd.
No.
He was too busy with the pointy object that he was using to delete them. And that was where he was getting his kicks and jollies. Um, so it wasn't the actual act itself. He was using the sharp, pointy object as he would if he was doing something disgusting to the women. So the fact that they're trying to say, oh, well, it was his semen, yeah, it's just a stretch. And when Edwards and Liu published in the Journal of Forensic Science in 2019, the journal issued an expression of concern, basically an academic warning label. Why? Missing data. They couldn't produce original DNA sequences, methodology. There were gaps in the critical details missing, or they were vague. They had problems with their probability calculations, conflict of interest. Edwards had a financial stake in a best-selling book for their projects. The journal hasn't redacted the paper, but it's flagged as unreliable. In 2024, when they announced new findings with whole genome sequencing, scientists asked, where's the paper? Where's the peer review? It hasn't been submitted to any journal. They went straight to the media. Dr. Turi King says that tells you everything you need to know. Real scientists submit to journals first and talk to the press after, once the work has been validated. This is publicity masquerading as research. And we know that all of you people, you trial junkies, you truth seekers and justice, you know this by watching these criminal cases we watch when they find these cold cases. They don't come out instantly and say, we've got them. Sometimes it can take a year to do this research. They make sure their work is checked and double checked. They don't want to give people false hope. So let's think about that. And Catherine Eddowes, she was a real person. She had a family. She had children. She had grandchildren. Karen Miller is her great, great, great granddaughter. And she's now in the middle of this circus. She's been paraded in front of cameras. Her DNA has been tested. She's been told we've solved it and given hope and closure. And then scientists tear it apart. And she's left wondering, did they actually solve it or is she being lied to? The Kosminski descendants have been told their ancestor was one of history's most notorious serial killers. This isn't just an academic debate. Real people are being affected. And Aaron Kosminski himself, the asylum records describe him as incoherent, suffering from auditory hallucinations, refusing to eat food prepared by others, and refusing to bathe. They describe him as harmless. His documented violence, brandishing a chair at the attendant once, allegedly threatening his sister with a knife once, and that's it. Compared to the Ripper, a man who murdered at least 5 women with extraordinary brutality, who used surgical precision to remove organs, who operated in complete silence and vanished like smoke. That's not someone that's having auditory hallucinations. The profiles don't match. Yet Kaminsky has been since he's died, convicted in the court of public opinion based on questionable DNA evidence and Victorian police suspicion. If he's innocent, we can't know for sure. His name has been dragged through the mud for over a century. And let's talk about what good historian DNA looks like. We know back in 2012, King Richard III, there were multiple samples from teeth and bone. Clean chain of custody, every step documented. Independent laboratories studied the results. They had multiple descendants that they were able to test different lineages with, full data publications in peer-reviewed journals, multidisciplinary confirmation, radiocarbon dating, skeletal remain or analysis, battlefield trauma, historical records result, scientific consensus. So it wasn't just a whim, they showed their homework. We also have back in 1918, the Romanovs. The mitochondrial and nuclear DNA cross-referenced multiple family members from different lineages tested, international collaboration, Russian, UK, US labs independently verified, historical records, medical details, photographs all matched, complete transparency result, scientific consensus that they proved that the entire Romanov family had been deleted. But the Shah, no documented chain of custody, no independent laboratory verification, no full data publication, contested provenance, single source testing by researchers with financial stakes. It's not even in the same universe here for a real scientist. And the uncomfortable truth, we want Jack the Ripper to be solved. Patricia Cornwell, a famous author, she's put a book out regarding this. Everybody is interested. This is one of those cases that piques everyone's interest. We want it so badly that we're willing to overlook red flags, though. I'm not. We're eager to accept weaker evidence than we would for any other case. I'm not. Because Jack the Ripper is the monster in the dark, the predator who strikes and vanishes, the killer who mocks authority. For 137 years, he's been the one who got away. And that drives us crazy. But there is a lot of the evidence that when the Blitz happened in London, evidence got lost. Every generation has a new suspect. The 1920s, it was a mad doctor. In the 1960s, it was the member of the royal family. The 1990s, it was an artist named Walter Sickert. The 2000s, it was a barber named Aaron Kosminski. Each theory gets debunked. Each one has fatal flaws. But we keep trying because solving it would mean justice for the victims. It's not who gets the glory, it's justice for the victims. Proof that evil doesn't win. Validation that science can triumph over darkness. Those are the sentiments. But you can't override the evidence or the lack of. Think of the Golden State Killer. It was tested and done thoroughly, the DNA to catch him. All those years they had waited to get him, but it was done with science. So let's look at our missing people. Remember these faces, When you're out and about in public, please put that cell phone down. If you're on public transport, look at these people, see if you can spot someone, contact the authorities if you do. Even if you're mistaken, it's better to check. People leave voluntarily sometimes and then can't get back home because they get in a dangerous situation. And we do know human trafficking is real, you guys. So please trust your instincts. If you recognize someone, call. Okay? It's just that simple. And don't assume that someone else is going to do the call. You do it. And if you're fearful of the police, go ahead and email us at tips, the number 4, trialjunkiesunited@gmail.com. We'll pass along the information. Now, the first person we have here, this is Addison Baker. He's 39 years old. It's very important because on December 25th, he had gone from North Dakota, where he's from, to South Dakota with a friend or an acquaintance to Eagle Butte, South Dakota. He's 5'7", 190 pounds, brown eyes and brown hair. And he had just relocated there and he doesn't know people in the area. He called his mother on Christmas Day to tell her that he had been abandoned by the person he had left with only the clothes on his back, and he had nowhere to go. So she did file a police report in North Dakota for Mandan Police at 701-667-3250. If anyone's seen Addison, please contact them. Amanda Eder, she's 40, December 25th, 2025, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Amanda was leaving a woman's shelter. She was last seen December 20th, 2025, leaving the Children's Home Shelter for Families in a white 2012 Mitsubishi Outlander Sport. Her hair is brown. Her eyes are brown. She's 5'7". She weighs between 170 and 185. Sioux Falls Police 605-367-7212. The Shawnee Scouts of North Dakota 701-893-68441. And Okeechobee, which is Siska's organization, 605-981-0923. And Siska, I hope I said that right. All right, I really tried. Next, we have Caitlin Rose Clark, 23 years old. She's been missing since December 31st. Location, Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota, around 2 p.m. She's 5'5" and she weighs about 115 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes and black hair with red tips at the end. She was last seen wearing that red hooded sweatshirt with a pink jacket. It's the one picture over there at the far left, with tan or gray pants, brown boots. She had been dropped off at Eagleton, Minnesota. I think she'd come on the train on December 30th, 2025. She had called her family from a store in Eagleton, Minnesota, and they haven't heard from her since. They are concerned she has a health issue. They don't say what it is. Clark was last seen with Candace DeVell Winston and an African-American male. No additional identifying details about the individuals have been released. Clark is originally from the White Earth Reservation and Pine Point area of northwestern Minnesota. Family members and law enforcement stress her disappearance is totally out of character. And because of her medical issue, it's important to find her. So the Eagleton police at 651-675-5700. Okay, and the next one we have is Jessa Pepion, 17. She's been missing since December 26, 2025, from the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana. She is 5'8" and weighs 110 pounds. Her hair is brown. Her eyes are brown. She was last seen wearing a gray sweatsuit. If seen, contact the Blackfeet Department at 406-338-4000. 17 years old. Let's get her found. Next, we have Lanaya Rassett. We don't have a lot of information, you guys, and she's 14. She's been missing since November 14th from St. Cloud, Minnesota. The St. Cloud, Minnesota Police Department is 320-345-4444. They do have a national Crime for Children 207-0079. Let's get her found. She just looks like a little baby. She's so sweet. That one breaks my heart. I mean, they all do, but she just looks so young there. Last week we did already talk about Emily Pike, but I did want to put up the flyer they have now put out because we know that she is deceased, but they are now offering a $200,000 reward if anybody was in the area of Mesa Drive and McKellips Road in Mesa, Arizona, or walking on foot, because we know she was found on February 14th of 2025. We're coming up on a year in just a little over a month. 20 miles north of Globe, Arizona, off Highway 60 and the Forest Service Road. 200,000 is a lot of money. So if anyone has any information, contact the FBI at Phoenix Field Office at 623-466-1999. Or you can submit tips to the Gila County Sheriff at 928-425-2311, option 1, or San Carlos Police at 928-475-2311. That's why it almost makes you think that this had to be a single person doing this, because normally with that kind of money, somebody would talk. Just saying. Okay. So in closing, you guys, DNA, did it solve the Jack the Ripper case? No, it didn't. Could Aaron Kosminski have been Jack the Ripper? Maybe, but maybe he wasn't. We have to be honest about what science can and cannot do. Science can eliminate suspects, and mitochondrial DNA is actually what they use to eliminate a lot of these people. And science can also corroborate other evidence. But science can provide pieces of a puzzle. But science doesn't work miracles with contaminated evidence, broken chains of custody, and undisclosed methodologies. When Edwards and Dr. Liu claim they definitely, categorically, and absolutely ID'd Jack the Ripper, they're not doing science. They're doing storytelling. And that's fine if you label it as such, but don't call it proof. Could you not call it closure? Don't give families false hope and then get defensive when actual scientists ask for the data. These are victims of Jack the Ripper, and they deserve better. Their families deserve better. Marianne Polly Nichols was the mother of 5. She was proud of her new bonnet. Annie Chapman, who made flowers and crocheted to survive. Elizabeth Stride, who had come from Sweden in search of a better life. Catherine Eddowes, the intelligent, cheerful woman who pawned her boots. Mary Jane Kelly, the young woman who sang Irish songs in the rain. They deserve a real investigation, real science, real answers, not headlines, not book deals, not publicity tours. And maybe, just maybe, the answer is that we'll never know for certain who Jack the Ripper was. Maybe that's the truth we have to accept, because chasing false certainty is worse than accepting uncertainty. Say their names: Marianne Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. Remember, you guys, every killer depends on your silence, and please don't give it to them. If you know something, speak up. Because it wasn't a mannequin, it never is. Remember, somebody knows something. Somebody always does, and silence is betrayal. If you have a story that needs some attention and you want to be out there and tell the story, contact us at Trial Junkies United at gmail.com. We thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. If you appreciate our work, make sure you share this, click on it, do the comment, do all that mumbo jumbo that YouTube needs us to do, because we want to get the stories out. Until next time, we love you guys all. Stay informed, stay compassionate, Keep seeking truth and keep demanding justice. And never stop speaking up. Say goodnight, Doc.
Good night, Doc.
We love you, and remember, the criminals never stop, so neither do we. Until next time, keep fighting for justice. See you next time on Trial Junkies United Presents Justice After Dark. And have a good night. Thanks for dropping in. Ciao.
In 1888, the fog rolled thick and gray through Whitechapel's narrow alleys, where the desperate came to stay. 5 women walked those cobblestones, seeking shelter from the cold. Just pennies for a bed space at the White Castle, we're told. Mary Ann and Annie, their stories cut too short. Elizabeth and Catherine, no justice in the court. And Mary Jane Kelly, the last one we know. 5 souls the world remembers, but their dignity we owe. They weren't just headlines, they were mothers, they were daughters, trying to survive the night in London's darkest waters. The Ripper took their bodies, but he couldn't take their names. We remember them as people, not just victims of his games. Dear boss, began the letter. Was the writer truthful or a fake? The media circus gathered as 5 families' hearts would break. He wasn't the first killer, though the papers made him famous. 4 pence bought a bed space for the poor with nowhere else to go. Walking after midnight, selling nothing but themselves. They weren't just headlines, they were mothers, they were daughters, trying to survive the night in London's darkest waters. The Ripper took their bodies, but he couldn't take their names. We remember them as people, not just victims of his games. The world was watching London, but who was watching them? 5 women in the shadows, society condemned them. We'll never know the truth of who walked those streets at night, but we know the names of those who lost their fight. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, hear their call, Elizabeth Stride. Catherine Eddowes, we remember all. Mary Jane Kelly, the 5th and final name. They deserve so much more, and their 15 minutes of fame. When you hear the story of Jack and his dark game, remember first the women, remember every name. Because having silences betrayal, we won't let them fade. 5 lives that mattered then, 5 voices unafraid. In the shadows of Whitechapel, we remember them today.